So welcome again. This is how, or our discussion this afternoon is going to be sort of how we learn at Salisbury Manor, how your children are taught, and kind of the science behind it and the information as well. So I promise this will be the only quote, the only bit of sort of information that you get along this line. So what is learning? Ultimately, what we want our children, your children to do is to learn. We want them to remember more. So learning is defined as an alteration in the long-term memory. So what we're teaching them, they're remembering. So how does teaching look at Salisbury Manor? It probably differs quite significantly from maybe how I was taught, maybe how some of you were taught as well. So on the right hand side here, we've got our framework for the delivery of lessons. And this is a strategy. This is a sequence that we expect to see in all lessons, and we expect to see it in all lessons where appropriate, because this is the most effective way for children to learn, to remember more. So our teaching and learning policy is based on the Rosenshine 10 principles of instruction. There's a lot of research and information about that as well that you can go and have a look at it. But ultimately, these 10 principles that we base all of our teaching around are based on how our brain works and how we store information. It's also based on observing what people define as kind of master teachers in terms of who get the best results from tests. And it's also research into sort of how we can model, how we can support children of all abilities as well, because that's really imperative. So what does a normal lesson look like? And actually, some of you are probably in a really good position at the moment. So some of you might be sitting with your children and seeing this happen on a day-to-day sort of basis. So we always start our lesson with a recap. It's not linked to the learning. So for example, if I was about to teach a lesson on Shakespeare or Macbeth or something like that, it's not necessarily linked to that. What it actually is whatever we taught 2 weeks ago, we go over it again. We check, have they understood it? Have they remembered what we taught them? So in the top right-hand corner here, you've got, in week 1, you've got your LI, your learning intention is to simplify fractions. And then in the 3rd week, you can see that the recap's to simplify fractions. So at the start of the lesson, they come in, there's no teaching, if you will. They come in and they just answer these questions. They've been taught it before. They were taught it 2 weeks ago. Can they remember how to do it? If they can do it, great. If they can't remember how to do it, then that's something that the teacher can pick up later on down the line. But what we're effectively doing by doing a recap at the start of each lesson is we're checking, does your child remember what we taught them 2 weeks ago? If they don't, then we can put something in place. The next part of our lesson, we have to go over the vocabulary that they're gonna see in each lesson. Your child won't be able to access a lesson on comparing and ordering fractions using the denominator if they don't know what a denominator is, they don't know what a numerator is, they don't know what a factor is or equivalent fractions are. So once we've gone through the learning intention and what we expect to see in each lesson, then we just go through some subject-specific vocabulary in order for them to be more successful within that lesson and for them to access that work as well. Vocabulary as well is also a huge determiner on outcomes in later life as well. Children with a greater vocabulary statistically go on to be more successful in their lives as well. Prior to lockdown 1, we had specific vocabulary lessons. The vocabulary lessons were taught once a day and they were for 15 minutes, and they focused on the words that they'd find in their topic. So for example, year 3 are looking at the Stone Age at the moment. So maybe one of their vocabulary words might have been Neolithic or Mesolithic or something to that effect. The next part of our lesson, so we've got the recap, the first part of our lesson. We've now gone through with the children, okay, these are some of the words that you'll see in this class. These are some of the words that you'll be exposed to and you need to know in order to access the lesson. And we've got a very got a sort of a long phrase here in terms of the metacognitive modeling, which for me is I do. And what that means is this is the part of the lesson where the teacher teaches. The teacher doesn't ask for the children's sort of input or what they think. It's about the teacher explaining how to do something. So going through a problem on the board, verbalizing their inner thoughts, and explaining how the children should do it. And at this point, we'd expect all the children to be sat on the carpet, if they're in a carpet, or in their chairs at their desk, just watching the teacher. And the teacher will be going through on the board how to solve the problem and verbalizing their inner thoughts. So that's the first part of kind of teaching within the lesson, really. And it's really important that at this stage, we expect the children to be sat silently, to be watching the teachers, because they know that once they've watched the teacher do it, then they're going to do it next. And that brings us on to our next point, which is guided practice. So they've watched me model ordering and comparing fractions with the same denominator. I've gone through it. I've been on the sort of the flip chart within the classroom, or maybe on the screen, how it is at the moment. And I've explained how I solve these problems, and everyone's just watched at that point. So that's the teacher teaching. The next part, as we build up to kind of more independence and what we'd expect to see, and it is tricky at the moment in our current situation, is our guided practice. And this is kind of the we do. So the I do was the teacher talking, only the teacher talking, and the we do is the class doing it together. So we use something called Kagan strategies, which we've got some examples on the next slide. Children work in pairs or fours or larger groups to solve problems. And these are the same format of problems that the teachers just taught. So they'll be on the same kind of line in terms of whatever they've just seen the teacher do, they're now going to kind of practice it. And rather than just sort of going off and doing it by themselves straight away, we ease them into it and build their confidence. And we also have the ability, because they're working in groups, that they can support each other, and we can check whether they understand each other, can understand what the task is, because ultimately that's what we want. So kind of the first stage is the teacher modeling, teaching, going through how to solve it. The second stage is about working in pairs or small groups to solve those problems together. And we used Kagan strategies to make it engaging, to make it fun, to make it different in every lesson. So kind of some of the strategies that we use are these. So we've got a rally robin. So in pairs, students alternate generating brief oral responses. So for example, listing adjectives to describe a character. So if you had sort of Batman, how do you describe him? You might call him strong, and then someone else might say heroic. It's kind of like ping pong back and forth between each other. We've got time paired share, where a child will have 15 seconds to say all of the adjectives that they know about Batman, and then someone else has got 15 seconds as well. So everyone's got the opportunity to share their ideas. The next couple more strategies are round robin. So when they're working in a larger group and they just sort of go around the group in a sort of clockwise or anti-clockwise, say, just sharing their answers. So that's when we're working in a slightly larger group. I would just like to say that we're going to look at sort of about 5 or 6 sort of strategies here today, but there are hundreds, and some of them are quite specific to specific sort of subjects. But the children really love kind of these strategies. It's an opportunity for them to work with their peers, to do different activities and practice what the teachers have taught them. Rally coach, so the partner takes turns, one solving the problem while the other coaches. So in other words, if I had the pen in my hand, my partner would be saying, right, okay, what you need to do is you need to look at the denominator, you need to look at the number on the bottom and compare them and so on and so on. It's not just a case of, okay, we're working in pairs, and what we want to avoid and what we do by this is this builds engagement. They're fun, they enjoy doing these activities, and it also stops kind of one person doing all the work and one person sitting there. Because ultimately, if one person does all the work, I can be confident that they know what they're doing, but I'm less confident that their partner knows what they're doing. And they're going to get onto a stage very soon where they're going to be working by themselves. And so they need to know what they're doing. The next one, and I'll be honest, this is their favorite one, is stand up, hand up, and pair up. And it literally is like what it says on the tin. So the children might be sat on the carpet at the moment. We ask them to stand up, we ask them to put their hand up, and then they pair up. So they just wander around the classroom, their hand in the air, they find a partner, they go back to back, and then they start sharing answers with each other. So the kind of the movement, the different activities, the children really do sort of enjoy that, and we're trying to think how we can incorporate some of these things in terms of using the chat box and breakout rooms as well, in terms of our online learning and how it is at the moment. The next stage of our lesson, so we've done a recap at the very start. We have gone over whatever we did 2 weeks ago. We've then explained kind of the learning intention, what we expect them to see. We've then gone over kind of vocabulary. Okay, this is the vocabulary that you're going to see in this lesson. This is what it means. Okay, we're pre-teaching this vocabulary so that you can be successful in this lesson. The next part of the lesson is the teacher is talking at the children, and they're explaining how they solve this problem, how they model it on the board. They're verbalizing their inner thoughts. Okay, so I'm adding this number on here, then I take it down to here, and so on and so on. So they watch the teacher do it, kind of like the expert. And now the next bit is kind of the we do. So they're working in pairs, fours, larger groups to solve that same type of problem together. So they've watched the teacher, they've done it in groups. Now we need to test, can they do it? They've watched the teacher, they've done it with their pairs, they've done it in their smaller groups. I need to be confident as a teacher that my class, once I set them off on their independent learning, their activity, that they know what they're doing. So we use something called an assessment point. And we have, as you can see on the board, kind of like 3 questions here. And we use our fingers to show what our answer could be. So it could be, so kind of like, which sign is the greater sign, sorry. And then a teacher would do a countdown. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, show me with your fingers. The teacher then gets an instant idea of who's got it and who's not got it. And then they will go through there. From this assessment, the teacher will go, right, okay, can this child, this child, this child, and this child stay on the carpet? I'm going to remodel it for you. I'm going to do the I do bit again, and then we can do the we do. But all the children that the teacher knows has got it right, they're ready. Okay, they don't need to watch the teacher teaching again. They're ready to start their independent learning, and they're ready to sort of progress and move on. So our assessment point is really important. It's our opportunity to check for understanding, our opportunity to check, do the children really get it? If they get it, great. We don't want to hold them back anymore. They're ready to start their independent learning. They're ready to work by themselves. If they don't get it, okay, well then that's something that we need to know as teachers, and it's something that we need to remodel and re-go over. So if we've got a number of children that didn't quite get the wrong answer, we need to find out why. So that's why we reteach it, and we re-go over kind of those key points, and we redo that I do and we do, and that'd be kind of like a small kind of group work on the carpet. As I've kind of mentioned it before, we don't necessarily use the bronze, silver, gold, as I'm sure all of you are all aware. We've got the 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of like groups, and it's important that your child knows what group they are. And in terms of those groupings as well, they are flexible. They're not a kind of like, this is what group your child's in. This is the group that your child's in at the moment. The teachers are flexible in terms of if they notice that, okay, we've just started a new unit of work on Monday. Okay, it's now Wednesday. Well, actually, so-and-so and so-and-so have shown me actually, they've been really successful in their learning on group 3. Okay, they're ready to move up to group 2. So we choose we set an activity that's at their level, and it's really important that they're doing it at their level because it allows them to be independent, it builds up their confidence, and it allows them to progress. What's also really important from our sort of worksheets and our information as well is that everyone's got the chance to kind of move on throughout the lesson. So there might be kind of like some arithmetic questions to start. And then we've got after that, it'll move on to sort of like reasoning and problem solving as well. So within our worksheets, they get progressively like harder and harder as well to move them on. You might also see if you've been flicking through group 1, group 2, is that actually some of the questions are the same. Some that are on group 1 are on group 2 as well. And you'll just find that maybe they're further down than where they are. When we do our independent practice, so as I've kind of said, the teachers are on the carpet at the moment. They're working with the children that are just need a bit more support and extra model, 1 or 2 models, and then they can go off and work independently. When your child is working on the independent task, they do that in silence. That allows us as teachers to be really confident that they're focused on their learning, and it also allows us as, or myself or whoever as the teacher, to focus on those children within the carpet as well. They've had their opportunity to talk and discuss it with the partners. Well, actually now it's an opportunity that we want to see what you can do by yourself. Okay, that's our real kind of check for understanding, to check to see where they are. So I've kind of talked about what a general lesson looks like. Okay, yeah, it's easier to say what it looks like in an English lesson and a maths lesson. This isn't a lesson. This isn't necessarily the format that will follow every lesson. Some of you have been doing some GT with year 3 and year 5. Okay, it doesn't necessarily apply. But these structures, these ideas are the most effective way to ensure that your child is learning. And when we say learning, is that it's going to their long-term memory. It's been stored in their long-term memory as well. So this kind of lesson structure as well, hopefully you've been able to see it with your child as well. This is the lesson structure that we use as many chances up, sorry, as often as possible. But we're also doing other things as well to support learning, because that's kind of like on a day-to-day basis. But what else is going on at Salisbury Manor? We also have something called prior knowledge tests. And in reflection, they should probably be called kind of like post-knowledge tests. But let's say, for example, in year 3, I'm in spring 1 at the moment, and I need to test, did they remember what they learned 3 terms ago? So they would do a test in spring 1, or 3 half terms, of what they learned in summer 2. So there'll be all of this kind of like topic base and maybe terms of the Victorians and so on and so on. And we are testing whether they have remembered what we taught them a number of months ago as well. So we're doing our recaps at the start of the lesson, but actually we're also going back to kind of further before as well, in terms of have they remembered what we taught them 3 half terms ago as well. Again, if we notice that there are things that haven't been remembered, there are things that haven't been memorized, then that's another teaching opportunity, and that's something that the teacher will pull in as well. The next thing that we're doing, which is kind of started in September, is kind of the gap filling lessons. So prior to the school closure in kind of lockdown 1, March, April, June, etc., we had specific vocabulary lessons and we had specific arithmetic lessons. We've replaced these lessons with gap filling lessons. And when your child returned to us in September, they sat a test straight away. And from that test, we did an analysis on them in terms of what they know and what they didn't know. And this piece of software provides us with interventions, provides us with activities. You might have seen some of these online called sort of Shine. They might have been in your files, specific to what they didn't get right in their test in September. So we've got a reading one, a writing one, and we've got a maths one as well. So kind of the gaps that your child had when they sort of returned to us in September, based on the summer test. So for example, if my child's in year 5, when they came in September, we got them to sit the summer test from year 4, and the gaps that they had from their summer test in year 4, we filled in our days with a maths, an extra math session, an extra English session based on what they didn't know. And that's continuing as well when we return to school as well, and also is being built into the kind of independent learning activities as well. So we are aware that the children have some kind of gaps in their learning from kind of missed learning opportunities, but we have done an analysis of them, and we have got specific activities based on what they didn't get right in the test to support them and to gap fill effectively. We also have termly assessments. I kind of just mentioned one there really. At the end of autumn, spring and summer, we have kind of a rising stars test, which provides us with a scaled score. Anything under 100 means they're working below. Anything over 100 means they're working sort of at or above. So we get a score as well, so that we can compare progress and see how they're doing. The final thing is that we do is also called low stakes testing. It kind of fits in with the assessment point question as well, but we believe in low stakes testing, and tests aren't recorded, but we use the low stakes testing as a form of retrieval. So we might have a sort of a few questions that we want them to do independently by themselves. That testing aspect and part of the lesson allows them to retrieve that information from their memory as well. So we build that into our lessons and part of our curriculum as well to engage that part of the memory and bring it back to sort of the forefront of their thinking. I know there's specific sessions on kind of the other things that we've got in terms of like reading aids or phonics and so on and so on, and that will be sort of communicated to you in further down the line in terms of these parental sessions. So I just wanted to say sort of a big thank you so much for your sort of attending today. As I said, these will all be recorded, and we will be continuing these kind of every day on a range of different themes as well. So thank you. I hope that you found some of the information kind of useful in terms of what your children are doing, and hopefully because you've been joining us in kind of like the live learning as well, kind of, oh yeah, I see how that works. Okay, I understand why that part of the lesson looks like that at the moment as well. But always more than happy to explain how things work here and all the changes that have been made to ultimately sort of improve Salisbury Manor and improve the sort of the provision that we can provide your children at this school as well. So I'm just going to stop the recording now. If you've got a specific question about anything that links to sort of how we learn at Salisbury Manor, then please feel free to sort of ask it. If you don't, again, thank you so much for being here and finding out a bit more about sort of why we do things in a certain way.